experience, and in some cases even more than 20 years experience, filing a large number of bug reports that get rejected, well over 5%. In fact, almost everybody's over 5%, regardless of their number of years of experience. So statistically, this assertion that the reason that bug reports get filed that shouldn't have been, quote unquote, shouldn't have been filed, and that's a separate assertion too. The reason the bug reports get filed that shouldn't get filed is because people don't have enough experience. The testers don't have enough experience. Turns out to not be supported by the data. Now, if I hadn't done this test and I had just gone forward with this recommendation to lay off or fire the testers or reassign the testers who had less than 5 years or less than 10 years experience or whatever, that suggestion might very well have carried the day, and it would have been completely and totally unjust for that to have been done to those people, because statistically there is no connection there. There's no statistical correlation here. And so, you really have to be careful about testing these things, testing out these sort of assertions that sound reasonable, because, as I say, that's the thing that sounds reasonable and is wrong is the most dangerous kind of wrong, and people will do things that sound reasonable even if they're wrong. If something's wrong and it sounds stupid, then nobody's going to do it anyway, because you say, well, that's obviously stupid and I'm not going to do that. But when something sounds like it's reasonable, it sounds smart, and you suggest it and it turns out to be a really bad idea, bad ideas can easily carry the day when they're couched in the right language and they appeal to somebody's sense of what is reasonable. Okay. You can indeed over-automate. I said one of the metrics that we look at in our assessments is this percentage of tests automated. And I think this is a good thing. It's good to automate. Certainly certain kinds of tests, regression tests, performance tests, stress tests, these are things that need to be automated. But you try to automate too many things, and you start to get into the situation that Douglas Adams lampooned in his book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, where the people program a computer to determine what the meaning of life is and the answer to all ultimate questions. And the computer, after centuries and centuries of thinking about this, comes back and says the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is 42. Basically, a computer is designed to do certain kinds of things, and to the extent that what you're trying to do in testing fits with what a computer can do, then that's great. But you start asking a computer what the meaning of life is, or asking a computer to run tests that aren't actually automatable, then that's not making sense. That's not an intelligent use of automation capabilities or an intelligent use of your scarce resources. And I say scarce, I mean, if I'm making a bad assumption there that your resources are not scarce and that you have all the resources in the world, then God bless you for that. You are one of the few. Most of our clients are dealing with scarce tester resources. So it's important that if you're going to think about doing something, it can be as upfront expensive as automation, that you do it on the right things. Now, what's a simple rule of thumb here on what to automate versus what not to automate? Well, a simple rule of thumb is if a test requires frequent tester intervention to run, in other words, it cannot run unattended for any great length of time without a tester having to engage and try to keep it going, or if the test requires tester intervention to interpret its results. In other words, there is no reliable test oracle. There is no way that you can set up something that the automated tool can automatically look at and say, okay, this is what the correct answer is, whether that's a baseline file or a legacy system or something like that. If you can't do that in an automated way, that's not really an automatable test. So frequent user intervention, or excuse me, frequent tester intervention, tester interpretation of results required. Either one of those things is a red flag that spending time trying to automate this is probably not a good use of your time. Now, I'll give you an example of over-automation, and this is one that those of you who heard me talk about the 10 stupid things, you've heard me use this example before. It's telling a story on myself, which is always allowed. This is the automated testing that we created for a multi-operating system, multi-database query tool, where we tried to get 100% regression test coverage of all of these different operating system database supported combinations. And we were so fixated on that we were ignoring serious quality risks in the areas of usability and installation and configuration and so forth. Basically, we were just focused on things that were important, but we focused on them beyond the point of diminishing returns, which I think is an important thing to keep in mind. I gave a simple rule of thumb for determining whether a test was or wasn't automatable on the previous slide, but also keep in mind that even if you're dealing with a set of tests which are theoretically automatable, that you are going to reach a point of diminishing returns, and this is related to Boris Beiser's pesticide paradox, where he was saying, running the same set of tests over and over again is like spraying a pesticide on a field over and over again. Eventually, it stops killing bugs. Yeah, I think you can extend the pesticide paradox to say that if you've got a set of tests that are very similar, and you've automated, say, 90% of those tests, or 75% of those tests, or maybe even 50% of those tests, you might very well, in trying to automate the remainder of those tests, have reached a point of diminishing returns. By diminishing returns, I mean that the value that you receive for automating those tests is not equal to the value that you could receive from automating something else, or perhaps even doing something else that was not related to automation. So keep that in mind. You can definitely have too much of a good thing, even if with automation, even if it did start out to be a good thing to automate a particular set of tests. Now, I'll give you another case study here. As we saw it with a client of ours, they wanted to automate compatibility testing. This is a hardware company, and one of the things that they're worried about is application compatibility, operating system compatibility, driver compatibility on their systems. And they decided, oh, well, we're going to try to automate this compatibility testing because there's so much of it. We have to run these same compatibility tests over and over again against every one of these platforms. Well, that sounds great. You think, okay, yeah, automating a repetitive testing task, that's classic test automation sweet spot. Well, no, because ultimately, even though they were able to automate the tests themselves, every 30 to 60 minutes, there needed to be some sort of software install done, and there didn't seem to be any way around that, and they spent a whole lot of time trying to come up with a way of these things running unattended, and just never could do it. And they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on tools and effort and so forth trying to make this work, and ultimately had to give it up. So, as I said, tests that require frequent tester intervention are really not going to give you a lot of benefit, because the tester, if they have to come back and check on the tests every 30 to 60 minutes, that really doesn't allow them to do a whole lot of value in that brief interval of time. Yes, they can go read their email, but email is a total hamster wheel, right? The more you send, the more you get. So the whole idea of having